Forget everything you thought you knew about colonial history. Because in the 1600s, an African queen didn't just resist a European empire, she humiliated it. They called her savage, immoral, dangerous. But to her people, she was a liberator. To Portugal, she was a nightmare they could not conquer. This was no queen by marriage, no ceremonial ruler. This was a military strategist, a diplomat, a warrior so formidable that European generals whispered her name in fear. This is not a legend, this is history. This is the epic story of Queen Nzinga, the woman Europe could not conquer. In the early 17th century, a time of ruthless ambition and brutal expansion, Portugal was aggressively stretching its empire along the west coast of Africa. Their objective was chillingly simple: seize land, extract wealth, and fuel the transatlantic slave trade. In what is now Angola, ancient kingdoms faced annihilation. Villages burned. People were captured, their lives shattered, bound for the horrors of the Middle Passage. Rulers were assassinated or replaced by puppet regimes loyal to Lisbon. Portugal believed Africa would crumble. They believed conquest was their destiny, even their divine right. They were wrong, because they were about to meet a force unlike any they had ever encountered, the storm named Nzinga. Nzinga was born in 1583, not into a life of pampered royalty, but into the heart of the royal family of the Kingdom of Ndongo, a kingdom already feeling the long shadow of Portuguese power. Her childhood wasn't sheltered, it was preparation. From the moment she could walk, Nzinga was immersed in the brutal realities of power, politics, and survival. Her childhood was her training ground. She didn't just learn diplomacy. She mastered the art of reading a man's soul across a negotiating table, understanding the intentions hidden beneath polite words. She didn't just learn to fight. She became a strategist who could turn a dense forest into an impenetrable fortress, wielding the very geography of her homeland as a weapon. She learned to negotiate, to persuade, to command, and to fight with a ferocity that defied her gender in a world dominated by men. Her brother, Ndongo, took the throne around 1617, but his reign was plagued by Portuguese aggression. The pressure mounted. Demands grew harsher. The kingdom teetered on the brink. His rule grew brutal. To secure his power, he eliminated rivals, including Nzinga's infant son, and sought to erase any future threats. In 1621, facing devastating military defeats, he sent Nzinga as his emissary to Luanda for peace talks with the Portuguese governor. Portugal expected a desperate African woman seeking mercy, perhaps even submission. Instead, they witnessed history. Nzinga was led into the governor's hall. The Portuguese governor sat elevated on his throne, surrounded by symbols of European dominance. The entire room was designed to intimidate. Nzinga looked around. There was no chair for her. This was not an oversight, not a mistake. It was a message. You will stand. You will look up. You will remember who rules here. The Portuguese expected outrage, embarrassment, or submission. Nzinga gave them none. She said nothing. She did not argue. She did not hesitate. With a gaze that could cut through steel and a mind sharper than any blade, she simply nodded to one of her attendants. A man knelt on all fours. Nzinga sat on his back, her posture straight, her gaze level, her eyes locked with the governor's. She was no longer below him. She was his equal. The room froze. Portuguese officials, trained in court politics, did not know where to look. No law had been broken. Not a single word had been spoken. Yet the insult was complete. In that single defiant act, she declared without uttering a sound, "I will not kneel to you." It shattered every European assumption about African women, African rulers, and African power. It was a declaration of sovereignty, a refusal to be subjugated, a moment of pure, unadulterated defiance. But the treaty quickly unraveled. Portuguese raids continued, and her brother fell into a deep depression, ceding more and more duties to Nzinga. In 1624, Angola Mbandi died under mysterious circumstances. Some accounts say it was suicide, driven by despair and pressure. Others suggest darker causes. Lisbon believed the threat had ended. They were wrong. Nzinga did not retreat into grief. She watched, she learned, she prepared. Her brother's death was not an ending. It was a catalyst. She moved swiftly, consolidating power and eliminating rivals. Nzinga understood something Portugal did not. Wars are not won by strength alone. They are won by strategy, by wit, and by an unyielding spirit. From that moment on, Nzinga's reign became a masterclass in strategic resistance. She converted to Christianity, not out of submission, but as a brilliant tool to navigate the European political landscape. She signed treaties, not as surrender, but as tactical maneuvers to buy herself time. While Portugal celebrated what they thought were victories, Nzinga built. She forged alliances with Portugal's rivals, especially the Dutch, and she navigated the brutal realities of her era. To understand Nzinga's power, we must confront the complex, often uncomfortable machinery of her reign. Her conquest of the neighboring kingdom of Matamba around 1631 wasn't just liberation. It was the absorption of a rival kingdom to secure her people and her power base. Her legendary alliance with the Dutch was purely strategic. A shared enemy made them temporary allies. When the Portuguese expelled the Dutch in 1648, Nzinga's greatest external support vanished overnight. And to sustain her decades-long resistance, she participated in the very system she fought. Her armies captured slaves, and she traded them, sometimes to the Dutch for weapons, sometimes to the Portuguese for peace. This wasn't a contradiction to her people. It was a brutal calculation. In a war for survival, captives became currency for guns, and guns meant the preservation of her kingdom's sovereignty. Nzinga wasn't a mythical, flawless hero. She was a supreme realist in an apocalyptic time. Her genius was using every tool available: diplomacy, warfare, and the grim economy of her age for a single, unwavering goal: ensuring her people would never again kneel to a foreign power. She understood the terrain. She trained her people in guerrilla warfare, turning Angola's dense forests into her greatest ally. Portuguese soldiers, accustomed to rigid formations, found themselves ensnared in a nightmare. Nzinga struck from the shadows. Ambush, retreat, repeat. And Nzinga didn't command from a distant tent. She was a whirlwind on the battlefield. Her weapons flashed. Her voice rallied troops. She shattered every expectation, every gender norm. She sometimes donned male military attire, commanding unquestioning respect among her warriors. Influenced by Imbangala traditions, she built a fierce army and incorporated women into leadership and warrior roles, establishing female bodyguards and leveraging Matamba's history of powerful queens. To the Portuguese, she was not just an enemy, she was a nightmare. For decades, Portugal tried to destroy her. They failed. They could not control her. Nzinga lived into her 60s, then her 70s, still ruling, still fighting, still winning. An African woman, outlasting an empire. In her later years, Nzinga did something even more powerful than fighting. She negotiated peace, but on her terms. She restored stability, protected her people, and rebuilt what decades of invasion had tried to destroy. When she died in 1663, at the age of 81, her kingdoms, Ndongo and Matamba, remained independent. Europe had come to conquer. Instead, it learned fear. Queen Nzinga's story was not erased by accident. Her name was buried deliberately because her very existence shattered the fictions of colonial power. That Africa had no leaders, that women couldn't rule, that Europe was unstoppable. But history, like truth, refuses to stay buried. Queen Nzinga was not just a queen. She was resistance personified. Proof that Africa fought back. Proof that women shaped history. Long before Europe claimed to rule Africa, Africa had queens who commanded respect, inspired fear, and shaped history on their own terms. Her legacy isn't just resistance. It is a testament to the indomitable spirit of a continent and the power of a woman who dared to defy an empire. So ask yourself, why isn't this taught in schools? Should Queen Nzinga be as famous as Europe's kings? Share your thoughts below. And if this story surprised you, subscribe, because this is only the beginning. There are many more African stories that history tried to silence. Welcome to Untold African History.